Record mode. All right, and we are good to go. Thank you so much for your patience while we all got settled, got everything in, went live on Facebook. So I'm Michelle Mapp, and I'm the interim CEO for RIE, and I'm really happy to be here with everybody tonight. And I'm super pleased to introduce, well, apparently I may not need to introduce because we can see from the chat, many people already know Ruth Anne. But I'll go ahead for anybody who does not know Ruth Anne. This is RIE Associate Ruth Anne Hammond. Ruth Anne is an author, consultant, and a dedicated member of the RIE community. She currently serves on the board of directors, facilitates parent-infant guidance classes, and serves as a mentor to those in the process of becoming RIE Associates. She served as faculty at the Human Development Department at Pacific Oaks College and Children's School for 18 years, as well as the head of its infant toddler parent program. She is a longtime member of Dr. Alan Schore's interpersonal neurobiology study group, and I am so pleased to have her here with us to share her knowledge on helping children to manage their emotions. Thank you so much, Ruth Anne.
Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. Thanks for putting this all together. It's absolutely amazing to be here with so many wonderful people that I know and so many people that I don't know that I would love to know. And the thing that's really spectacular about this for me is that I feel like I've never felt like I was part of a specific era in history before in my life. And this time when we're all sheltering in place and having to change how we do everything and learn a whole new way of life is actually so amazing that I just feel lucky to get to spend a few moments of this incredible moment in history with all of you. So thank you so much for being here. Should we just go ahead and let me share my screen now? Is that what's going on? Okay, so I'm going to share screen. It's going to take 2 or 3 clicks to get us going here. Okay, I'm going to close that. And so the topic seems to be of interest to people. How to help young children manage their emotions. We're all really busy right now trying to manage our own emotions and still be a good resource to the children in our lives. And so I just want to talk about that. And there's a whole lot of theory and a whole lot of science about this. And I hope I'm not going to get too into, you know, theory and, I don't know, geekiness, but I can't help it. That's what I like to do. So I hope you'll stay with me. Oh no, it's not doing that again, Michelle. Michelle, it's not forwarding. That happened. It was working fine. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to go back over here. Okay. Okay. I'm going to go back here. And I'm going to share again.
Yep, go ahead and let's just go through it the way we did before.
Yeah. And there we go. Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. All right, so where this whole thing starts, okay, you see that little monkey on the left of the screen, but where that little monkey actually starts is I like you to think of that beautiful, we've seen many of them, gorgeous pictures of the Milky Way with all the stars arrayed in heaven, and think of the Big Bang. You know, think way back. This present moment has been unfolding for I don't know how many billion years. And is it 13? I don't know. And right here, right now, this moment, these bodies that we have are an outgrowth of that event. So conditions through the universe changed and unfolded in such a way that human beings evolved. And the evolution that we have determines some of our behaviors and lots of our feelings. So the first thing I want to talk about is that genetic history that we all carry in our bodies, that give us the opportunity to survive. So genes are there because they have been preserved so that we can survive. And Jaak Panksepp, who was the person who coined the term affective neuroscience, actually studied the brains of mammals in order to understand human emotion and animal emotion and the similarities. And what he found is that there are regions of the brain that are dedicated to these 7 primary affects or motivation systems. So we're going to come back to this a little later and talk about the seeking system and the fear system and panic and grief, rage, play, care. And care and lust kind of kick in a little later. So those earlier ones are the ones that we, with young children, see that they have these primary motivations. Primary means that they didn't have to have any experiences to be able to feel these feelings. Nothing about the original motivation is learned. It's all inborn. So from this nature aspect, the child psychiatrist after World War II, John Bowlby, studied child's behavior and saw the outcomes of many children after the war that had real difficulties with their emotions. They tended to sometimes become criminals. They had very poor relationships. They had low ability to manage all kinds of feelings. And he studied their histories and found that these children had been separated from their parents during the war and placed with people that, kind of kept them physically okay, but didn't really attend too much to their emotional well-being. So he started really trying to study the nature of attachment and how and why children attach to the adults. And at the time, they believed that it was because, the mother feeds the baby, so the child is attached to the baby. But we know from later studies, Harry Harlow's studies, that actually baby primates want to be near the mother whether she feeds it or not. That attachment is something that happens much more primally, and it is, but it's based on continuity of behaviors between the parent and the child. Let me see where's next. So as he and his colleagues got further into attachment, they started, well, first of all, Mary Ainsworth was his student who continued studying, and she believed that every child who was cared for by its own mother would have a secure kind of way of being in the world. But as she studied 1-year-olds, she saw that wasn't so. And she went deeper and deeper into her studies and discovered that the children that have what appear to be secure behaviors had very well-attuned, sensitive caregivers whose responses to the child were appropriate to the needs of the child. And then there were children who were anxious or had an ambivalent kind of insecure attachment to the parent, and found out that by studying the adults in these dyads that the parent was kind of sometimes there and sometimes not, sometimes responded and sometimes didn't, and so the child had to work very hard to get that attentive care But if they worked hard enough, they could get it. And then there were children who displayed a kind of insecurity that made them seem avoidant. And they found out that the parents were distant emotionally. They didn't respond to the child's emotional cues. And when they did respond, it wasn't fitted to the child's actual communication. It was intrusive. There's a fourth presentation of attachment behavior called disorganized, and it isn't a pattern. It's the opposite of a pattern. The child doesn't really have any effective strategies, whether to avoid or to approach. So they found out that those mothers, these were studies of mothers, but it would go for other parents too, had their own unresolved traumas, and they themselves were emotionally unavailable to the child. Okay. And then comes Alan Schore, who is my teacher, and he spent 10 years doing deep research, studying every possible brain study and relating it to attachment patterns and attachment literature. And he wrote this most seminal book, Affect Regulation and the Origin of the Self. And since then, he's written, I don't know, 6 other books or something. And he's going to be coming out with a new book before too long that I think is made for the lay audience a little bit more than the deep science. But his work tied the attachment with the neuroscience into something called regulation theory. And the first quote that just captured me so deeply is the experience of being with a regulating or dysregulating other is incorporated into an enduring interactive representation. And what that really means is that the child is taking in the adult, taking in the experience of being sensitively attended to by an attuned parent or less sensitively attuned to, and turning those repeated interactions into brain structure that tells them what the world is like. It tells them whether the world is safe or scary, or you can get what you want, but you have to work really hard to get it, and you have to complain a lot. Or, you know what, it's better if you just keep to yourself, don't let anybody really know how you feel, because that doesn't usually go so well, because the parent is very dysregulated by the child's emotions when the child's emotions get strong. So this is what I learned about in my study group. And you can wrap it up. I mean, it's so deep, but you can wrap it up with the first thought that the brain is an experience-dependent organ. The brain is not finished. We all know that when the child is born. But how it sets up, the brain is not just in your head. It's distributed through your whole body. So how you're cared for determines how strongly the connections are between your gut, your heart, your lungs, your ears. It all flows together. If things are going well, it's a strong circuit that goes from the lower brain, the limbic system, into eventually the orbitofrontal cortex, which is about emotion regulation. If it doesn't go so well, the connections are not as sturdy, and they don't allow for upward and downward shifts in homeostasis. So, okay, so epigenetics is what comes after genetics. because genetics moves very slowly, but sometimes conditions move very quickly. So the human body, and actually every organism, has the capacity to adapt rapidly without having genetic shifts. So epigenetic just means above the gene. It happens separate from the gene, but it influences the gene. And that came up because they started knowing about epigenetics because when they mapped the human genome, they were expecting to find 100,000 because we make about 100,000 proteins in our body, and that's what the genes are there for, is to be the template for making these proteins. But we only had about 22,000 or so. And so they started figuring out that the genes don't always express themselves exactly in the same way. And what influences how the gene expresses itself is the environment in which the gene is active. So it's very complicated because every body part, doesn't have every gene active, just the certain ones that relate to its function. But what happens is that the emotional environment plays a huge part in the epigenetic structure that's building from the time an infant is actually probably in the 3rd trimester before it's born, that the relationship is already establishing itself in that early time. And then at birth and after birth, the brain gets so much bigger. What is it? It's building 1 million synapses per second early in life. And those synapses connect one neuron to another neuron, and that is what forms those connections between the parts of the brain that are meant to communicate with one another to help us stay in balance. So the quality of the care influences the early forming right brain. The right brain is in rapid growth in the first 18 months of a child's life. And you can kind of watch them and watch their behavior and see when the left brain starts going into overdrive in terms of growth, because it usually happens when they're about 1.5 years and you start getting a lot more language and you start getting a lot more desire to control and to control objects and to grasp. It's when children start having altercations over toys in our classroom. And so when I see that, I go, oh yeah, this brain's right on schedule. This is going great. So in the first 1.5 years, the important learning that the child is doing has to do with emotion regulation and emotional development. And when they've had these contingent experiences with adults in that first 1.5 years, their brains develop and their nervous system, their stress response system develops in such a way as to help them later on have self-control, which is later and more left brain, but self-regulation is right brain. And the goal of all of this secure attachment is actually, according to Alan Schore, the capacity for intimacy, which he's not even shy to say it's about being able to love. And so we can have adaptability for ill as well as good. And brains can change. And even, if a child is showing an insecure attachment pattern and the family gets some support and changes how they are working with their child, the child can have a different attachment style afterwards. So it's not like it's a life sentence. It's like, it's still growing. It could change if we get help, if we need help. And so what resilience is everybody talks about, oh, kids are so adaptable. Well, yeah, they can adapt for good or ill. They are adaptable, and that's good. That's why we can have different cultures. That's why we can live in different climates. It's great. If we can give them enough early positive experiences, they're going to come out all the more resilient. So here's the formula. This, and I have to talk about what's co-regulation, what's auto-regulation. Okay, so the younger an infant is, the more interactive help they need in staying in some kind of emotional homeostasis, which means not too over aroused and not too under aroused, right? And then, you know, being able to auto-regulate when it's not too terribly stressful. So there's a balance of co-regulation and auto-regulation that is kind of the summing it up, it's self-regulation. But it's not all about the self. You know, interactive regulation is as big a part of self-regulation as handling stuff independently, right? And there are cultural aspects of that too. You know, some cultures expect more independent capacity, and some cultures are more communal and expect to have a lot of people around to help them with everything. So there's not one exact balance of these things. There are so many factors involved. But the important thing to remember is that young children need a good partner. Donald Winnicott said, there's no such thing as a baby. There's a baby and someone, you know, and you can change it and say, there's a baby and a co-regulator, a partner in the dance of emotional stability. Okay, so we don't want total stability because life would be boring. We would be the same. It would be, you know, the only, what is it? The only time you don't have some stress is when you're dead. Like, stress is not bad. It's just something that needs to be handled. Let's see where we're going from here. Okay. So if you put the attachment patterns and the self-regulation stuff together, what you find is that the secure person is able to self-soothe when there's nobody around and it's not that high stress, and yet they can go and get help from a friend, from their mom, from their partner, to help them handle a more stressful, more difficult situation. Okay, so being able to move flexibly between auto-regulation and interactive regulation is the healthy pattern that you know, we're aiming for as we raise children. The anxious and ambivalent person, whether it's a child or adult, needs more help. They kind of over rely on co-regulation, interactive regulation with another person. And, you know, I say, well, you know, have you ever had a friend that you just thought, man, that friend is a little needy? So that might be what we're talking about, you know. And then that more avoidant person, which in an adult they call dismissive, overuses auto-regulation. They don't really connect with other people to help them down-regulate their unpleasant emotions or their difficult emotions, and they don't necessarily use people to upregulate their positive emotions either. Yeah, I haven't talked about that. It's really important to think about attachment as being more than just down-regulating negative emotions in our children. That's one of the things that Schore brought to attachment theory, is the idea that that the upregulation the positive affects is also a co-regulatory function of the adult. And when I think of my son and the delight with which he could laugh, and now my grandson, you know, that's never done. You're never alone when you're laughing that much, or rarely, right? It's almost always a social thing. And so we stretch our children in their capacity for joy, and we cushion them, you know, in their capacity to go too far into, you know, sadness, distress, rage, those things. You know, and then I don't really want to talk about disorganized, but that's, you know, you don't really have any very healthy means at all of self-regulating. So auto-regulation can mean something like, you know, sitting by yourself, binge watching a TV show instead of like really recognizing the fact that you're stressed out and you need, you know, you need to calm yourself. So you're not using other people to do that. And sometimes it can be substances. It can be, you know, maybe even too much exercise. I mean, I think we should all use exercise to help us regulate ourselves. But some people do it too much, you know. So what we're looking for is balance. And the long-term benefits of all this healthy self-regulation are not just psychological, because, you know, I gotta say, I don't really think of a baby as a psychological creature yet. They're so physical. Their psychology, their mind is getting built through all of these interactions and physical experiences of feeling well regulated. So, you know, we feed them when they're hungry. We hopefully wrap them when they're cold. We downregulate them when they're so upset they can't manage it themselves. So, but they get physical health from it, a strong immune system. They get that ability to have these close relationships. They get to know themselves, right? Because if nobody's really paying attention to your feelings, you're probably not either. Or you don't differentiate them very well. And if you're not at peace, you can't really even listen to your own body very well. So the other thing is that healthy self-regulation and secure attachment are predictive of learning, of being free to pursue interests and, you know, buckle down and do the work that you need to do to learn a new language or learn math or something like that, and being able to follow through on a project. But if you're really dysregulated, it's really hard to follow through on a project, and it's really hard to focus. So there's just tremendous benefit to spending a lot of time trying to connect emotionally with young children. So the good news is nobody's perfect, but you don't have to be perfect. Donald Winnicott said, a child doesn't need a perfect mother, he just needs a good enough mother. But, you know, we've evolved since then, and there's lots and lots of men caring for children and doing a great job. So, you know, what they do is important as much as what mothers do. And we just need to be good enough. Because, you know what, if we were perfect, they would have a really inaccurate notion of what the world is actually like. You know, they would not be able to downregulate their stressors if somebody was always there to make sure everything, you know, our job isn't really to make them happy all the time. Our job is to keep them within windows of tolerance for all their feelings, you know, and let them feel like they're not flying alone as they're learning how to live in a very complex world. Yeah. So these feelings, we talked about the instincts. You know, seeking is a big pervasive part of the brain that reaches into a lot of the other areas too, but it's the need for exploration. It's that baby crawling up the belly of the mom to get to the breast right after birth. It's the toddler, you know, getting into every cupboard and trying to figure out what's there. You know, that's the seeking instinct is what helps us survive by knowing what's in our environment, what are the resources available to us, what's dangerous, what's safe, okay? Fear is the need to be safe. Panic and grief is that separation distress that the young have, and it's grief when we lose someone we love. So panic and grief serves our need to be connected to loved ones. Play is absolutely a primary need in basically all mammals, but particularly humans, because it's through play that we learn how to connect things and how to create something new and different. So play is a primary emotion. He considered it a primary motivation. Care is what inspires us to take care of these children. And then lust, of course, is what inspires us to have them at all. So those ones, you know, that are the top 5 are the ones that's what we're talking about, you know, helping them manage. And feelings come in all sizes, so that there's positive and negative feelings, and there's low intensity to high intensity. So it's lots of variance in what feelings are. So we want them to connect with all their feelings, and we want them to know that we'll be there to help them get some of those high intensity positive affects like hilarity, you know. And we want them to know that we're going to catch them when they start falling off into total, you know, meltdown, tantrum time, and we're not going to leave them there all by themselves. So the question is, what do we actually do to help them with these more difficult feelings? And the main thing, you know, is to be with them. You know, we don't want to abandon them when they're just having their worst time. And we want to listen and hear what it is they're feeling. And, you know, accept the fact that they're having this feeling. Even if we can't accept a certain behavior or behaviors, you know, there's no wrong feelings, there's just feelings. And we're not there to fix the feelings, you know, and nobody likes to feel like they're being managed. So in Educaring, one of the great things is the idea of having house rules, right? So having house rules with clear and consistent limits creates this sense of safety that children need to have, that they're not going to be allowed to just flap in the breeze, right? That somebody's going to pull them back from you know, chaos. So, you know, house rules should be few, but they should be always enforced. Otherwise, they're not rules, you know? It's just like, oh, well, mommy wants you to stop doing that, but I'm not gonna insist that you stop doing it. We have red light, yellow light, green light in RIE, which is really great. Red lights is like, that is a rule that is not, or a behavior that is absolutely not gonna be allowed for any reason. You know, you're not gonna play with the matches unless I'm there with you and teaching you. You're not gonna, you know, throw the glassware. You know, I mean, you don't have to have a rule for that, but that's a red light. Green light, everything's groovy. Nobody needs any co-regulation, and everybody can just kind of be together. And then those yellow lights are when we decide if this is important or not. And sometimes it is because you know, maybe your capacity is low. I've got a headache. I really can't let you play your drum right now, you know. But sometimes the drum's fine. Okay, so creating clear and consistent limits creates safety, and then empathize, but don't over empathize, because sometimes, you know, we can take them too seriously. Like sometimes when a toddler says no, it means maybe, right? So knowing that feelings are like a wave, like a crescendo and a decrescendo, and they come and go. And even when it's hard, to just be and know that it's going to get better. It's not going to stay this way. Anna Tardosh said very wisely that the adult should always build the bridge, should initiate the building of the bridge back into harmony when you've had, you know, a difficult time, when you've had a rupture. Rupture and repair is so great a concept, you know, that it's the repair that matters. It's not the fact we're always going to have ruptures. You know, we're never going to always be in harmony. Tronic discovered that even, you know, that the average mother misses about 70% of their child's communication overtures. So they're only picking up on about 30%, but that's enough, right? And but if the child can get the adult's attention, that's what's important. So repair is the key, and restoring communication when there's been a rift, building the bridge back is so important. I read something today that was an inspirational piece, but it said what we need most of all is safety, security, and guidance, right? So the guidance is, you know, with a really young child, it might be a little redirection, you know. I won't let you play with this, but I will let you play with that. That's guidance. With an older child, it might be having a conversation about why this particular behavior isn't going to work in our house, you know, or on this day at this time. So I have a couple more notes. You know, the thing to remember is that when we're really dysregulated, we need to go and find what calms us down. We need to go find our interactive regulator. And, you know, if you're kind of at home with just your kids and you don't have a partner there to spell you, you know, it's good to have a plan B for when things get a little out of control and you need some relief for yourself, to find a way. And that one of the things that we like in RIE is for every home to have a safe space for their child to be while you do something else. So for a very small child, it could just be a crib if you don't have any other space, or a corner of a room that's completely gated off and doesn't have anything they can hurt themselves with. Having that capacity to separate when you're feeling real dysregulated, right? Because it's very hard when you're dysregulated to provide that calm consistency that helps regulate the child. I'm trying to know what time it is. What are...
Well, if you'd like, we have some questions and we can start our Q&A section.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, you know, I'd love to hear from anybody. Share my picture of my grandson reading my book that he's on the cover of. And yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, well, then let's get started. One of them is, how is secure attachment formed practically? Can you give a couple more examples of what this looks like?
Okay. Shall I stop my screen share?
Sure.
and come back on? Yeah?
Yeah, sure. That sounds fine.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so examples of how secure attachment is formed. Okay, okay, I'm gonna give you an example of a thing when a baby maybe is cold, right? And is crying in their crib or whatever. And secure attachment would form when the adult came close and felt the child and said, "Oh, it seems like you're cold. Let's see what we can do for you," and maybe pick up, give a warm hug, you know, change clothes, put on something warmer, have some interactive event that happens to meet the child's need, and puts then the child back down and says, "Okay, I think you're good now." Whereas if you just, you know, drop a blanket on him, that's not going to provide that connection between the solution to the problem and the person. For instance, holding a baby to give a bottle, or, you know, at the breast, yes, you're always holding them. But if with a bottle, people have a tendency to sometimes want to prop the baby, or, oh, the baby can hold his own bottle, so, you know, here, I just hand it to you. And food becomes an auto-regulatory event rather than tying the satisfaction of that bodily need with the satisfaction of being held in someone's arms and cuddled and talked to, you know, and caressed during a feeding. So that's, yeah.
We have a follow-up question to that is pretty important. What should we do when perhaps a child starts hitting us as a way to handle regulation?
Okay, I love this. I wrote a blog about this the other day, or a while back, called, "My Child Laughs When She Hits Me." So, you know, I think it can be a real sign of security that a child is feeling unhappy about something and their aggressive impulses take over, or even if they're not seemingly unhappy, but they just try it because they have aggressive impulses and they need to try them out. And they try them out on the people that they trust. You know, it's like, you know, children are inclined to pull up on their parents to learn to stand up because they know their parent won't let them topple over, right? So they're gonna try some new behaviors and some aggressive behaviors on their parent. And of course you have to get kind of serious about that and teach them. That's guidance, you know. You're not gonna I'm not gonna let you hit me. You know, that I just don't let people hit me. I'm gonna put you down now. And then sometimes the thing happens where the child will start to laugh because you got really serious and you got really firm about not hitting mommy or dad. And then they laugh. And what I believe that they are trying to shift your emotion. They're trying to regulate your emotions by getting you to switch moods. It's like, oh, well, usually when I laugh, you're happy. So let me get you happy. I'm going to laugh, you know. And so I don't think that it means what people think it means when a child does something like that to a parent and then laughs. So, you know, when they get reprimanded and laugh, people go, oh, they're so defiant, you know. But I think it's more like they're so uncomfortable because what you've done is you've given them this tiny dose of shame that you're not happy with them. And babies don't usually ever have to feel that until they get to a certain age and some of their more aggressive tendencies come out. And then you do start socializing them. And, you know, I don't mean unregulated toxic shame. I mean little tiny doses of don't do that. And they go, oh, I don't like that feeling. Well, the fact that they don't like that feeling is what's going to teach them not to do that. So you know, you can't back away. You can't pretend that it's all fine. You know, oh, mommy doesn't like it when you do that. You know, no, you have to be authentic. So that's, you know, being authentic is important, not unregulated, but authentic. Like, I didn't like that, and I don't want you to do it again.
Thank you. Next question that we have is, we had somebody who asked, is there a place you can go with your child to actually be assessed for attachment styles?
Yeah, I mean, you know, getting evaluated for, you know, some big official evaluation for attachment styles is pretty, you know, expensive, and unless, you know, what am I trying to say? If you have some doubt that things are going well, I think it's good to check in with an infant child therapist, or a you know, a child parent therapist, and just get some counseling. But I don't think you have to go and get necessarily a formal evaluation, you know. And a good therapist is going to be observing and guiding, you know. And what a good therapist does is becomes a good co-regulator, interactive regulator for the parent in patterning, you know, so that the parent can be a good interactive regulator for the child.
Okay. Could you please speak a little bit about responding to bedtime, nighttime cries as it relates to regulation and attachment? So people who are feeling uncomfortable with children crying at night while also reassuring them that it's not damaging.
Okay. You know, I think the whole let them cry it out methodology that is pretty well, you know, been rejected by most families, I think, you know, to shut the door and walk out, you know, that is too much stress on the child's capacity to self-regulate, just letting them cry forever and ever. But I asked Alan Schore and his wife Judith, who's a clinical social worker, and they work together. And I said, you know, when you are trying to change a child's sleeping pattern and you start a new program, they are going to protest. They are not going to be just, oh, you want me to go to sleep now? Or you want me to go to sleep here? Or you want me to go to sleep this way? Oh, fine. You know, they're going to go, wow, this is not what I was expecting. I said, you know, you can't do it without expecting there to be some crying. And they went, oh, no, that's okay. And I said, well, how long is it okay for them to cry? And I was glad. They said, yeah, you know, 15 minutes, maybe, you know. So a child who's going on and on. I mean, I tried to do the Ferber thing with my daughter, and it was bad, you know. Finally, after 45 minutes, you know, and I just went in, you know. My husband said, go get her, you know. So I like Eileen. I mean, if you haven't watched Eileen Henry, go on YouTube and watch her webinar that was last month. You'll love it.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a couple questions that have sort of all kind of come together here, and it's really, how can we help a child that is aggressive or engaging in behavior such as biting or more aggressive or violent behavior?
You know, I mean, I've had the same kind of challenges in my classroom with children, and I haven't always solved it. It sometimes it gets really hard, and I would wish sometimes for a child to get evaluated and see what else might be going on that's just you know, more organic, or you know, more you know, parent-child related. But I think the bottom line is that children who are really aggressive are really afraid. And their fear needs to be dealt with honestly, and, you know, a good look at it, you know. And I mean, that, aggression is often, a response to feeling like you're under threat.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that kids try stuff. I think somebody bashes somebody on the head with a plastic shovel just because they can, they're going to learn from that. But if there's a really persistent problem with children hurting other children or anybody, I'd like to get a deeper look. I'd like to call in the regional center or some kind of evaluative person, because there might be some sensory problems, some sensory integration problems. Sometimes sensory integration problems sets up a child for fear because the world doesn't make sense to them in the same way it makes sense to us.
Kind of on the flip side of that, if you could give us some signs that a toddler is actually securely attached. So what would be a sign? What are some of the behaviors of a secure attachment?
That they can that they can play productively for decent periods of time without needing a lot of intervention. That's one indication. Another indication is that they are able to get help, that they are able to ask for help when they need it, but it's not all the time, that they can do things on their own, but then they can come and seek assistance, to do something, that they don't worry if they're upset that they better not trouble somebody.
Mm-hmm. Here's a very interesting question. It's very timely. What about a child that has started to scream very loudly when contradicted, and this has started since COVID-19?
Oh man. I don't know how old the toddler is or what her life or his life was like before. So I can't give a whole scenario. But I think any toddler that is really protesting anytime they feel thwarted, I assume that contradicted isn't a verbal thing, but it's like, no, we're not going to do that now, is probably suffering from a little bit too much time indoors, a little too much time having to accommodate a lot of other people in a family setting, that maybe before they had a more child-friendly playground to play on, or, daycare center that had, a lot of things for them to do. But, anytime a child is screaming a lot, it's fair to say, it hurts my ears when you scream. I really will understand you better if you don't scream. I don't know. It depends on how you set a limit too. How you set limits makes a big difference. Say, well, I know you really want to go outside right now, but this is not the time that we get to go outside. We only get to go outside once today. Acknowledge the fact that they want it. There's nothing wrong with them wanting it. You just can't necessarily let them do it.
Can you talk a little bit about what to do? And this kind of ties into this because parents are under stress. Can you talk a little bit about when both the child and the parent are dysregulated at the same time? Sometimes, for an example, during a massive tantrum, or when a parent's issues are activated by toddler's behavior.
I wouldn't know anything about that. Oh, yeah, I would, actually. Again, that's a great time if you have somebody else around to ask them for help, and can you take over here? I've kind of had it. I need you to come take over. If you don't have someone, then I would say go run the bath. Run a bath, do something with running water, do something where there's negative ions getting released into the atmosphere. Find some way of engaging the senses in a more pleasant way. Everybody talks about taking deep breaths, but if you breathe in and breathe out for a longer count than you breathe in, that calms your nervous system. So if you breathe in 2, 3, and then breathe out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do that a few times and that'll calm you down. And I learned that from neuroscience too.
Our next question is, what if you have a child who who didn't know, either parents who didn't know about Educaring, or potentially an adopted child that you got later, or that you adopted into your family later? What can you do now, once a child is a little bit older, to undo not enough appropriate attention or care during infancy?
Maybe it's possible. I've often suggested this, especially with adoption of slightly older children, is to kind of really go back and recapitulate some of those attachment stages, right? So, being more physically available, being more emotionally connected, regulating, being fully present. Even with an older child playing games, you be the baby, I'll be the mommy, okay, now my turn, I get to be the mommy, and and just play at those attachment behaviors, even with a 4-year-old, who's exhibiting some difficulty and lack of trust, and setting up expectations. What would you like to do today? Okay, we're going to put that on the calendar and we're going to do it, and I'm going to not forget, and I'm not going to go, oh yeah, we'll do that tomorrow. It's like the infant learns trust in the world and in that first year. And if there's some, glitch that's happened, and it can happen for a lot of reasons, and you can grow past that, you go, okay, I'm gonna concentrate on showing my child that I can live up to my word. And what vegetables should we have today? Okay, you get to pick. You can trust me to serve what you've asked for. We're not having ice cream. I'm not offering that as a choice, but you know what I'm saying. Just to set up situations in which you have to live up to your word, and they can start learning that they can trust you. And to hear their feelings. I mean, that's a thing.
Yeah, definitely. How bad is it for a child to experience rejection from a parent right now because they're unavailable? And again, this is it's hard during COVID because so many families are working, and then people aren't able to give the children the attention they want.
It's hard for young children to be in the same room with somebody who can't be with them. They don't understand you're there and you're not there. They don't understand your priorities. They don't understand the stressors you're under. If there's any way to physically separate yourself so that you're out of sight and maybe a little more out of mind when you're having to work, and then making sure that you give some good quality time when you do have the time. No child is going to get 100% attention, right? And they wouldn't want, if we had it to give, they'd probably take it, but it wouldn't be really good for them. But in RIE, we talk about wants something time and wants nothing time. And wants something time is, we're going to do your bath now, or it's mealtime and we're going to be together and I'm going to feed you, or we're going to sit down and eat together. I'm going to help you get dressed, or I'm going to help you with your homework, is wants something time, where, the parent is more involved in getting the task accomplished. Once nothing time is the child gets to be in charge of what the activity is. And it doesn't have to be a long time, but it has to be consistent. It has to be something that's regularly available to them. And then you can set a timer and you can say, I have a meeting in 20 minutes, but I'm here for you for the next 20 minutes. What shall we do? But making sure that there are times when you can be fully present, and then, they can protest that you're not fully present the rest of the time, but they've had the meat and potatoes of your attention.
Mm-hmm. We're a little over, but just a couple minutes, and we have a lot more questions. So I'd like to take at least a couple more. That's okay. Okay. Sure. As teachers, what would be your best recommendation to explain to parents how important it is to have attachment with their children? And again, this is especially right now when families are so overwhelmed and forgetting about that importance. What is the messaging, or how would you explain to parents how important that attachment is?
Well, that the child, a child's sense of rightness in the world is based on believing that their needs are going to be met. And some of those needs are emotional and some of them are physical. And, I don't think teachers should be talking that much to parents about it's so important to be attached to your children, but you could talk about, how much time are you getting to spend with your child? Your child really needs some of your uninterrupted attention. What Mary Ainsworth discovered in studying these 1-year-olds is that the children who were secure had spent significant amounts of time with the mother. That's who she was studying. The mother was a good source of information about the child. She really knew the child. She really paid attention to what his day was like, what his experiences were, And then the third thing was that she enjoyed feeding the child. That their feeding relationship was a pleasure to the mother. So, it's not like we can say, oh, it's really important for you to be securely attached to your child. But it's like, I don't think there's anything more important to your child than spending, time with you as much, as you can spare, rather than delegating.
Yeah. How do you support a child as a healthy co-regulating partner when you're faced with another child or adult who is being aggressive, particularly if there may not be an apparent reason for that aggression? So I guess.
Okay, so there's one child who's getting aggressed on, possibly, and another child is the aggressor. Okay, how do we support the child who's
who's in a healthy co-regulating, let me reread it. How do you support your child as a healthy co-regulating partner when faced with another child or adult who is being aggressive?
Okay, well, the first and foremost thing is to prevent harm from coming to that child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To protect the child. That's the first job. The second job is to let them talk about how it felt or feels. Let them express their concerns and deal with those. And so I think protection and listening are major.
This one changes the topic a little bit, but it's how can you encourage a child to play more independently, especially if they haven't necessarily been great at this in the past and often look to adults particularly to play with them?
Okay. Well, I think you start incrementally. You can't throw them in the deep end. So one of the things that we do in a RIE class, for instance, and in Once Nothing Time is some quiet observation. So I'm just going to be here with you, and you have the pick of what you're going to do. You know, it's your choice of toys, whatever. And I will just be here and be with you while you do that. And if they want you interacting, let them be the leader. Let them be the director of the production, so to speak, you know, and you're just an actor and they're telling you what they want. But don't offer your own ideas until they've had a chance to express theirs and experiment and explore. So you be with them as they gain the capacity to play independently. So it's like a middle ground. And then when they're more able to fill their time with their own activities, then you can say, okay, you're good. I'm going to go in the kitchen and, you know, make lunch while you play. But yeah, it's a growing capacity. It's not something that happens all in a hurry. Yeah.
Here, we can finish up with this last question that I think is really important, and I think a lot of people are facing is, how do you foster secure attachment while also practicing social distancing in a childcare setting?
You know, a lot of what happens between people happens with eye contact, and it happens with the prosody of the voice. And so I have a hard time really picturing how a caregiver can be socially distant from a child in their care. I mean, probably wearing masks, that's different, but there's so much else to it. So creating opportunities for conversation and just being with. It doesn't have to be a hug or a kiss. We can't, you know, I mean, Magda never even thought that that's how we transmit love, but it was by being truly interested in what the child is doing. So being fully present, paying attention. You know, one of my favorite neuroscientists is a guy named Ian McGilchrist, and he wrote this book that was about this fat, and it took me 2 years to read it, but my favorite sentence in the book has 3 words, and it is, attention has consequences. And what we pay attention to in a child sort of guides them to become, right? So if we're paying attention to them while they're exploring, you know, while they're learning to eat with a spoon, while whatever it is they're doing, you know, that attention tells them they're important, and that your time is well spent just paying attention. So you don't have to be hugging, kissing, or anything like that.
Great. Ruth Anne, thank you so much. I know we can't get to all of the questions, but we will try to, well, first off, let me cover a couple administrative things. Some questions that have come up. Yes, we are recording this, and yes, we will post it to our YouTube channel within probably the next day. And for anybody who attended, we will have a certificate of attendance that will go out in an email following the webinar, probably within the next day or so. We're shooting for tomorrow. And I just want to thank everybody for coming here. We hope that you will join us for our next webinar in June with Mary Tuttle, who will be speaking about trauma. And we so appreciate, Ruth Anne, all of your time and your volunteering and answering our questions. And that's about it. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for spending this time with me.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
I want to see the chat.
Okay. All right, I'll give it a couple seconds. I'll turn off everything. We have a lot of different people chatting in the chat box here. We want to say thank you to everybody on Facebook as well.
Thank you.
This will be recorded on Facebook. It'll be up there, and then we'll have it on our YouTube channel as well.
There's a lot of nice thank yous there.
Yeah.